This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 541, Mautic. On today's show, we are talking about Mautic, marketing automation, and its history with Drupal with our guest, Ruth Cheesley. We'll also cover Mautic ECA as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Ruth. Ruth is an open source advocate with over 20 years of experience using and contributing to many having built a full-service digital agency. She now works as project lead for Mautic, supporting the community who build and maintain the world's first open-source marketing automation platform. Ruth is a lover of cats, a keen triathlete and flautist, but not at the same time, and is based in the east of England. Ruth last joined us in episode 343, all the way back in 2022. Welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development. Today, my co-hosts are Catherine Sabukas, backend developer and architect at Minecraft. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And joining us as usual, John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM. Welcome back.
Hello, everyone, and just a shameless plug. If you happen to be going to DrupalCon Chicago, Community Summit is happening on Monday. I believe it's the 23rd. I should have my dates. It is the 23rd. It's an all-day community summit. We have a great slate of schedule planned with fireside chats with some notable Drupal Association members, some talks from some community members, panel discussions. So if you are going to DrupalCon Chicago and you're going to be there on Monday, make sure you sign up for the community summit.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a principal solutions engineer at Aquay and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to integrate Mautic marketing automation into your Drupal website using ECA? There's a module for that. It's called Mautic ECA, and it was created in June of 2025 by Abhishek Mazumdar of Dropsolid. It currently has a 1.0.6 version, which works with Drupal 10 and 11. It is actively maintained, and for documentation has a pretty detailed README. Now, the project does have one open issue currently, which is not a bug, and it is officially in use by 3 sites according to Drupal.org. Now, with the module installed, your ECA models can respond to Mautic webhooks and can also make use of new actions to give you CRUD capabilities. So that's create, read, update, or delete for contacts and segments of your Mautic data within ECA. Now, Mautic ECA declares the Mautic API module as a dependency, and you need to use it to set up an API connection and to define any webhooks that you want to use in your models. It's worth noting that the maintainers of Mautic ECA also seem to be involved with a number of other modules in the Mautic API ecosystem, including Mautic Personalization, as well as Mautic Content Provider, which can expose Drupal content for use in Mautic, for example, to include in emails. So let's talk about Mautic ECA.
I mean, ECA is great. From what I remember last time we talked about Mautic and what I hope to hear today, Mautic is great. I mean, it seems like an awesome connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think this makes a lot of sense. It allows for a lot of that ECA kind of customization to happen. Talk kind of lends itself to that orchestration, the idea of orchestration that we talked about with Jurgen a couple weeks ago. And I'm wondering here, this is specifically for ECA, it would appear. So I'm assuming, the Mautic other Mautic integration modules that exist are probably just to kind of send information to Mautic and not so much use those actions and webhooks in ECA. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, when I was looking through sort of the Drupal modules that are integrated with Mautic, it seemed like the most popular one was specifically for sort of Mautic with web forms. So the idea being that when somebody fills out a web form, you can push that content into your Mautic data, and then that
Yeah.
person can either be updated as an existing contact or created as a new contact. But I thought this was a little interesting because it allows you to potentially do some more sophisticated things, obviously making full use of all of the capabilities that are built into ECA.
One thing that comes to mind, and I'm actually having this a similar conversation about this with a client right now, but like logging in once you create a user account, being able to push some of that account information into Mautic as like, hey, this person exists as a customer now, and they have this role, and this is like how we should kind of personalize and market to them. That definitely makes a lot of sense, and this would definitely help with that. So I can definitely see a use case there. And I actually just realized I used the word definitely like 3 times in that one sentence. Hmm.
Definitely did.
Ha! I see what you did there.
Well, thank you, Martin. As always, you found an on-topic module of the week. The thing is, when I see ECA integrations like this, it what make inspires me to just install ECA and everything and connect to everything. And I have to like remind myself that I need the use case from the client before I start just including all these. But it really brings me back to the early days in Drupal where I was just kind of point and clicking everything in, and it really makes me want to find a use case for this so I can kind of tinker with it. But if you use ACA and you use Mautic, it sounds like a perfect way to pull them in.
Yeah, I've heard somebody refer to ECA as like the new views in Drupal, and it wouldn't surprise me if, in a similar way, at some point we have at least a simple version of ECA kind of built into core to some degree. Same way that we have token as a thing that is now, in core but augmented in contrib, as an example.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like or maybe it's a new way of handling kind of actions that are kind of a core thing because actions historically have needed a little bit of love for a while. So maybe some sort of core framework of ECA that just provides the underlying API. And that's the direction the core is going, right? Is removing a lot of the direct implementations of things like the contact module and then spending more time beefing up the underlying API stuff and relying on like, Drupal CMS to pull the recipes in to pull everything together, which I mean, we're still in the early stages. It's only been a year or so that we've been doing that, but it seems like a much more maintainable way moving forward. And maybe this is the next step of that.
We were talking about documentation earlier, and I'm wondering if there's, from what you've seen, good documentation on this module. One of the things I've run into with ECA is a lack of it.
Really?
So yeah, I
Yeah, I
will
mean,
say that
I could be looking in the wrong place, right?
yeah.
Let's not. It could exist, and I just,
So I think there's two things to mention. So number one, there is actually a full documentation site specifically for ACA,
Yeah.
including a lot of examples that you can sort of browse through and download and pull them into like a test site or something like that. So if you want to see what best practices look like, there actually is quite a good volume of reference material there. But also, one of the things that's amazing about ECA is sort of the community support there. So there's an ECA channel
Mm.
on Drupal Slack, and if you go in there, ask a question, sometimes even a seemingly maybe obvious answer that you're looking for, there are people in there that sometimes Jurgen himself that will jump in and help you out. So
Yeah. I will say you're going to spend an inordinate amount of time making sure everything is documented. But one of the things that he continues to struggle with, I think, is how to properly promote that documentation, right? And continually improve it. So yeah, maybe we can put that in the show notes and maybe you can take a quick look at it and see if it kind of provides what you're looking for. Cause I know he spent a lot of time putting together a library of stuff. And I know it's a discussion for the next version on if there's a way to kind of start pulling together these types of examples in a cleaner way to make it easier for the community to contribute. Because I think right now a lot of it's he's doing a lot of that work himself. So, all right. Thank you, Martin. As always, another on topic module of the week. If listeners wanted to suggest a module of the week or just connect and discuss something we've talked about, what's the best way for them to do that?
we are always happy to talk about candidates for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as Manclue on all of the Drupal and social channels. See you next week.
Always me to want to say goodbye, didn't I? Wasn't I? Okay. So welcome back, Ruth. It's been as I mentioned in the show opening, it's been a 4 years ish since you came on last time. Can you give our listeners kind of a brief overview of what Mautic is and kind of how it differentiates itself from other kind of marketing automation tools out there?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, thanks for having me back. I think it was 2022, wasn't it? And how
Yeah.
time has changed, how things have changed since then. Gosh. So yeah, Mautic is an open source marketing automation platform. If you're not too familiar, you might know some of the proprietary tools like Marketo or HubSpot Marketing, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, that kind of area. It allows you to do email marketing, campaign management, lead nurturing, account based management, marketing analytics, all that jazz. And in terms of core differentiation, I guess the main thing is with Mautic, you can completely self host on your own infrastructure, managing your own data on your own physical servers or in your own cloud or whatever you want, really. So you control where your data lives and where it goes. You are not locked into a vendor and a particular infrastructure. If you were hosting with a particular Mautic partner, then you could move your Mautic to another partner because there's the ability to export all of your data and have that portability. And of course, like Drupal, being open source, having a REST API, having an ecosystem around Mautic, it means it is truly extensible. So you can modify Mautic, extend it, you can integrate whatever you need to integrate, however you need to. And you also benefit from the innovation that comes from the community. So people are doing really cool stuff. And a lot of the time they contribute that cool stuff back to core and it gets merged into our releases. So that's another thing that you don't always get with a proprietary tool because you have to wait for their roadmap and you have to, and sometimes they might not even do what you need them to do for your solution. So those are the main things that I see as differentiating from other tools.
Two questions. One, I imagine that a lot of like nonprofits probably use Mautic because like
Mm.
it alleviates them of that kind of like subscription cost to those bigger services and the data is more
Mhm.
self-contained. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think there are quite a lot of nonprofits. Obviously, it's not completely free because you still have to host it.
Sure.
And you need to have the infrastructure chops to host it if you start to scale.
Mhm.
So it's great to several million contacts, and
Mm.
depending on how much you're sending, you'll be fine on a reasonably beefy VPS. But once you start to get bigger, you do need to have that skills and expertise. But yeah, we do see a lot of small organizations,
Mm.
solopreneurs, people who are just starting up in business, who just don't have the available revenue yet
Yeah.
to pay for these big tools, but they do have the time or they do have the knowledge and the infrastructure internally to spin it up. And we've had businesses that have literally grown because of the fact that they had access to that technology, which wouldn't have been possible.
Mm. And then my other thought slash question was personalization. Does Mautic
Mm.
do personalization?
Yeah, it does. So we have various different ways you can do personalization. If you're using Drupal or Typo 3 or Joomla or anything like that, you're probably going to be interested in personalizing the experience on the website.
Mhm.
So in that regard, you can do that with dynamic web content, we call it.
Mm.
And that means that for general people, people you don't know or people you're not personalizing for, they'll see the default content, which might be sign up to our newsletter.
Mhm.
But if they're already on the newsletter, you replace that with a different call to action that's relevant to what you know about that person. And that's done with dynamic content.
Mhm.
We can also do the same kind of thing in emails. So you'd
Mm.
send one email and maybe use a different header image for different world regions, or you would use different content based on what products they're interested in or
Mm.
how warm they are in your sales funnel. You can configure that entirely for your own needs. But we also have things like A B testing and multilingual as well. So there's a whole load of stuff there that you can use for personalization. It just depends on what your strategy is for making use of that, really.
Makes sense. So
Yeah.
we're obviously a Drupal podcast, and listeners right now might be like, "Are we going to spend all show talking about marketing automation?" But Mautic and Drupal kind of have a little bit of history. I'm
Mm.
wondering if you can kind of tell us a little bit about that history and the relationship Mautic has with the Drupal community.
Yeah, so there's been a Drupal integration really since we started having integrations. I can remember really early on having conversations with the founder before he launched Mautic. And he was asking me as a marketer, like, what's important for you in a marketing system? And I said, it has to integrate with all the tools I use. And if it doesn't, then I won't use it because you end up with silos. So we've had a Drupal integration for a long time. We have a lot more now because people use Drupal in different ways. So they
Mhm.
integrate Mautic in different ways. 19, Mautic Inc., which is the hosting company the founder created in order to provide enterprise SaaS to really fund this open source project, that
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
acquired by Acquia. So that relationship between Mautic and Acquia became a lot stronger, and
Mm.
Mautic and Drupal through that. So they acquired Mautic Inc. They also acquired the brand and the trademarks and basically the whole community in the open source project. And we were incubated with Acquia for quite some time, actually, 4 years. And they
Mm.
really supported Mautic to become an open source project because at that point we were really sort of getting stuff over the fence from Mautic Inc. There was no kind of community structure or governance. There was no way for
Mm.
contributors to step up and lead releases, for example. So that support from Dries and from the team at Acquia was just fundamental, really, to Mautic getting up and running and really being able to leverage the open source community. And we spun out from them in 2023 and became a completely independent open source project. So they gave us seed funding for a little while to help us get set up, to set up our membership model and our governance model as an independent project. And that was 2 years, 2 and a bit years ago. So that's where we are now. We still have a really strong relationship with the Drupal community. We've got several Drupal agencies who are providing Mautic in enterprise capacity as well, alongside Drupal, obviously. So
That's
yeah.
interesting. You've worked very closely with Drupal, but how can just, normal Drupal users actually integrate Mautic into their workflow? What benefits do they get from that?
So I think increasingly what we're seeing is organizations when they're looking to buy services, they're not just thinking about their website when they're looking at what they need. They're looking a bit wider than that and what goes into my website. Well, I have, forms and newsletters and stuff. And I need to know what people are doing. And if you want personalization, I need a system that can do that too. So that's what we're kind of seeing adds more benefit in terms of Drupal users. Also, Mautic is built on Symfony as well. So there's a lot of transferable skills there in terms of developer knowledge. You'd have to obviously learn the Mautic isms, but the underlying framework is the same. We just released Mautic 7, which is Symfony 7.4. So yeah, enabling Drupal users to broaden what they're able to provide if they're an agency, for example, but also if you're running in-house to be able to then extend what you can do, like bringing content from Drupal into Mautic and using that to do your newsletters, like some of the case studies we've got.
Hmm. And you also obviously the idea behind marketing automation is to help increase revenue and adoption and certain goals like that.
Mhm.
So, what are some practical use cases where you've seen kind of Mautic drive that real business growth for people using it, aside from kind of the privacy concerns and ownership of data and that kind of stuff? If somebody's just looking for
Mm.
marketing automation tool, what does Mautic provide to them?
I think one of the important aspects is the lead nurturing. So being able to understand what someone's interests are as they're moving through the process of getting to know your company, understanding what services or what products they're interested in, and then also based on the behavior, how warm are they, how likely are they to convert, and at what point would you start to send different communications and messaging to them, or even for example, highlight it to a salesperson to say this person is showing signs that they're ready to convert. So that can help like with your revenue generation because it's a more efficient use of your time. You send it to the right salesperson. So I did a Mautic instance for a fire extinguishers company, and they did like agricultural fire extinguishers as well as boats and home and cars. And like if you need to send those to the right salesperson, and initially, they were just sending to whoever. But when we implemented Mautic, it meant that they could say, oh, this person's generally interested in agriculture. Let's fast track them to the agriculture salesperson once they get to a certain point in their journey where we're pretty sure they're going to convert. So it improved their business workflows as well as making it more making the communication to the user much more streamlined and much more relevant to their interests by using the agricultural products in the communications.
So so this is now gonna be a fire science podcast episode because now I'm curious, why is agricultural different? Is it because of the silos or the chemicals? Like,
Mm.
do you know?
I
I
don't
mean,
know all of the ins and
I'm
outs, but I
so
think it's like
curious.
the scale and also
Yeah,
the kind of systems that they're looking at and the kind of interests that people have and the
yeah,
case studies you'd be presenting and
yeah.
the length of the journey of a customer from initial interest to purchasing. But
I I
so
think
that's
that
definitely something that we see a lot of is lead nurturing.
yeah, that's a great point actually, because you know, we've all done vendor searches before for
Mhm.
clients, right? Where you start talking to somebody and you're like, okay, we have these particular requirements. Like an easy one
Mhm.
might be HIPAA compliance or PCI compliance or something like that. And
Mhm.
the customer's like, yes, we do that. Oh, sorry, the vendor's like, yes, we do that. And then you start talking to them like, okay, well, what about this edge case? And it's just obvious that they have no idea what they're talking about. You're like,
Mhm.
well, maybe, like, you're saying you do it, but you don't know what HIPAA
Mhm.
stands for, so maybe you don't. And so being
Yeah.
able to put the person and maybe they do, maybe you're just talking to the wrong sales engineer or something.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of funnel people to the people most knowledgeable about the particular product,
Mhm.
I can see how
Yeah.
valuable that would be.
And things like event marketing, so like communication before events, registration. I even just had a LinkedIn conversation with someone who did their entire wedding invitations process through Mautic.
No way.
Automating it all, like if people hadn't RSVP, automating the responses, sending them a text message if they hadn't got the
Hey,
email.
friendly reminder,
Like
chicken or steak?
I was like, "Wow, what a great example of how you could use Mautic." So yeah, like communication like that and automating the follow-up, automating through the right channel. Like if you've got a meeting booked with someone, you might actually want to send them an SMS as well as an email, for example. And Mautic's multi-channel, so it can
Oh.
support lots of different channels. You could do
Mm,
WhatsApp through some of the third-party integrations, Viber, Telegram, yeah, all those
Mm.
things.
so, is it fair to say, like, Mautic is to marketing automation as Drupal is to, yeah, content and web page management?
Possibly I might need a little bit more context on that
Yeah, I
though.
I I kinda left you out there, but, like, I mean, I'm just seeing, like, Mautic as highly integratable, highly
Mhm,
customizable, able to manage a lot of maybe more complex marketing flows and
mhm.
personalization, right? And, like, when I look at Drupal, I kinda look at Drupal in the same way, highly customizable, highly integratable, capable of handling not only your web content, but pushing things out to things like Mautic and other systems to kinda, like, provide that kind of
Yeah.
connective tissue.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mautic can be integrated with tools like NA10 or Active Pieces and things like
Mm,
that, which also then completely explodes what you can do as like a non-technical person.
yep.
Because a lot of the time working with the API, you think, oh, that's like, got to be deep in the weeds with development. But being able to use tools like that in the no code setting, it really expands what you can do with the marketing automation tool.
Question about that. So, a
Mhm.
couple weeks ago, as I said earlier, we had Jurgen on talking about orchestration in Drupal, and Drupal
Mhm.
orchestration kind of just came onto the scene relatively new, right? Of course, we've had ECA, but like now there's a formal orchestration module and kind of work going on there. I'm
Mm.
curious where Mautic is in their orchestration journey. Like, is this something that you guys started like a year ago? Is this something that's just come to the forefront? Like, where do you guys sit on that timeline, do you think?
Well, campaign orchestration is something that has been in Mautic since day one. So you can build really complex or really simple campaigns that push out into third party integrations that listen for replies and all of that. That's been a core part of Mautic. It's the
Mm,
engine of Mautic really that drives all of the automation.
right.
So we've had that since day one, really. We've had different expansions of that over time. And what we're working on at the moment, for example, is
Hmm,
creating a library of campaign templates that people can just click and install and then have like
oh,
a
cool.
double opt in campaign ready to go or a birthday celebration ready to go
Got
to make it easier for users to do that kind of orchestration.
So that's
Um,
interesting. So I guess the DNA of Mautic made it a little bit easier to integrate into some of those automation services and provide those hooks and
mhm.
provide the back and forth. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because
Hmm,
we already use event subscribers and stuff. We've got all of that architecture within Mautic. So, yeah, yeah, it was fairly easy. It's just,
Interesting.
yeah, setting up the integrations with those tools. And because we've got such a passionate community, as soon as you even think about that tool, there's probably a Mautic module there already. There's a
Right.
Mautic
yeah.
node that's quite well supported. There's an active pieces that's quite well supported. So,
So I wanted to go back to something Nick mentioned a little bit
mhm.
around data privacy and compliance. And
Yeah,
obviously Mautic is kind of self-hosted. You can set up your own Mautic instance.
yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, in general, how does Mautic handle data privacy and compliance, especially with regulations like GDPR?
Yeah. So we have been set up from the start really to allow you to do things like anonymization of the IP within the interface to
Mm,
comply with GDPR if that's important to you. So those settings are actually there within Mautic itself. We also have various cleanup tools that allow you to, like, to comply with GDPR. You need to get rid of data that's no longer relevant for you to hold. We've got tools that do
Mm,
that for you at the command line. We've got tools that anonymize the MaxMind data, for example, to comply with CCPA,
mm,
and you just run those as a regular cleanup job
mm,
within your instance. So we have all of that sort of built in. The thing with any marketing tool that you use is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them
sure.
drink. Like we can set up Mautic to be as secure as possible. We can set it up to have these tools that you need to run, but it's ultimately down to the user to make sure A, they're doing things properly, like they are actually doing a have you have you given us consent to contact you? They are reconsenting their lists regularly. So
Yep.
from our side, that's like an educational thing
Hmm.
that we try to encourage people to do. But also managing things like deletion requests and stuff. That's practically easy to do within Mautic, but the user of Mautic needs to do that. And we have things like do not contact flags where if someone says they don't want to receive contact from you on the email channel, then it won't send a contact unless it's a transactional must get through email like a password reset or
Sure.
an account
okay.
informational email.
Hmm.
And that's applicable to SMS as well. So we have a you could unsubscribe from SMS, you could unsubscribe from email, etc. Every channel has that.
So I actually want to go back a couple of questions, and
Mhm,
well, I guess not that far, because at the top of this question, I mentioned that Mautic is self-hosted.
mhm.
I'm wondering, are there hosting providers that provide Mautic specific hosting?
Yes, there are a lot. So we actually if you go on our website, we have a hosting partners directory.
Ah, okay.
And the people who we list there are members of Mautic. So you have to be financially contributing to Mautic to be
Mm,
listed in our hosting partners directory. And so they're from all over the world. We have
mhm,
hosting
Okay.
providers from all over the world. We also have the managed Mautic hosting, which is the official managed hosting.
mhm.
We run a 14-day trial where people can just kind of log in and kick the tires and
Oh,
try
interesting.
Mautic with lots of guardrails. So you can't use the API, you can't install plugins. You can only send emails to
Yeah.
yourself. That's mainly to stop people spamming.
Yeah.
And then if they continue
So,
with a hosted account, we get 40% of the revenue from that. So
Sorry,
so
so that hosted account, is that like a set version of Mautic, or do they have the ability to, is it like a SaaS, or do they have the ability to customize it?
So if you pay for the managed Mautic hosting, then yeah, it's a SaaS provision, but you do get to be able to do the API and the plugins. And once you pay, it's just in the free trial setting. We have it quite a tight sandbox because it's obviously something, sending emails is something that people like to do for malicious reasons. So we
Yes.
have to be a bit
yeah.
careful with that. So, but yes, it's a fully featured, and we make
Got it.
sure that that's actually a vanilla Mautic when you're doing the trials. There's no sort of corporate branding in it. It's just Mautic as if you had taken it off the shelf and installed it yourself.
Hmm.
So,
Uh, Related to that, I'm actually curious, like, what kind of I mean, obviously, the more users you have, the more emails you're sending, the more personalization, the heavier the
mm,
requirements. But I'm curious for what kind of server specifications are you looking at if you're gonna self-host?
mhm.
Because the clients that I have that are interested in it do a fair amount. but they're also
Mhm.
realistic about their budgets? Like, is it something that if it was a very small organization that maybe sends a monthly newsletter, they could set up on like a, a DigitalOcean droplet, or is that like
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
okay, so it's fairly
Sure, yeah, what you need to be aware of is not so much how many contacts you have, it's what you do with those contacts. Because with Mautic, because we're tracking things like the email opens and the clicks on the emails and the people landing on your resources, when you do a blast, you get that incoming traffic. So that's often where people find the challenge on the infrastructure side is queuing that incoming traffic as
okay.
you start to scale. So you do obviously need to have enough space and enough RAM and what have you to be able to process the scale of emails that you're sending. But most people will start off with a reasonably cheap DigitalOcean droplet or AWS or whatever, and then as they start to scale, then look at scaling it up.
Okay, so it's similar to a system like Matomo, right? If you have
Yeah.
except you have more burst it sounds like you have more burst traffic because, like you said, when you send
Uh
an
huh.
email, most people open it within the first 5 minutes, 10
Uh
minutes.
huh.
Okay,
Yeah,
good to know.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So it's those periods where you tend to have more as you scale, you tend to have to think more about performance and infrastructure and things like that.
Okay, and then I assume you have partners that can help with support for something like that if they wanna if the client wants to self-host for GDPR
Mhm.
reasons, but they need assistance with how to optimize something, you have partners that can help advise.
Yeah, absolutely. On the hosting partners directory, you can search by I think it's called Bring Your Own Mautic, and that is where
Okay,
you have your Mautic and they help you with supporting and installing, configuring that kind of thing. Yeah,
very cool.
That's cool. I want to
yeah.
go back to personalization because that's a big one
Mhm.
that a lot of
Yeah.
people are interested in. And what types of the advanced segmentation or targeting can Mautic do? Excuse me. But I'm particularly interested in like things that your competitors maybe struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, we do all of the basic stuff like what pages on the website have they visited, what resources have they downloaded, how have they how have they engaged with your emails or SMSs, like have they opened them, have they clicked on them, all of that kind of stuff you can do out of the box. And we can also do segmentation based on when they filled in this particular form, this field value was this, and therefore put them into that segment. With Mautic, you can create as many custom fields as you need. There are some limitations based on the size of the database table, but most people don't hit that. So any kind of data that you want to capture that's like unique to your particular business, you can create those fields to capture that data and then and segment on those. Also engagement patterns. So we have stages, for example, where you can have someone moving through the stages of a funnel. That one's relatively common to be done. One of the really interesting things that Mautic does that are not a lot of other competitors do is we have points-based scoring, which is fairly common, but you can set up your own points that are meaningful to your business. So you might want to score people based on how sales ready they are, and that could be a group of like sales readiness points. But you also might be interested if they're interested in educational material or if they're interested in event engagement or something like that. So you can actually set up your own point groups and award and remove points based on the activity and behavior, and then use that
Hmm,
as a filter in combination with a country or whatever. So because you can do these and or filters in the segmentation and personalization, you could say if they are in the United States and they've got more than 100 points in the event readiness and they've attended one event with us in Boston before, so it really can get very specific to your own business needs and really, really flexible to meet whatever the requirements are of your specific marketing situation.
Hmm.
so
That's
what
cool.
kind of reporting and analytics around something like that does it provide as well? Can you so, like, for example, if I'm setting up that trigger that you just mentioned, you're in the United States, you have
Mhm,
100 points, and you've attended previously in Boston. One thing
mhm.
that is very problematic is the more ands you have, the less likely you have somebody in that pool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
how easy is it to see like, oh, you just narrowed the list to one person or 0 people or
Mhm,
50 people? Like, does it make kind of validating your decisions with segmentation easy, or is that
mhm.
something you have to just get used to the tool for?
Yeah, so with those dynamic segments, as soon as you save it, it will show you how it might take a wee while to rebuild the segment. That's done on a cron job, but it will show you how many people are in that segment. And then you could just go and edit it and tweak it to be less restrictive if you've only got 4 people, for example.
Okay.
We don't live calculate that on the fly as you're choosing your segmentation because that would have some quite big performance overheads. But it
Okay.
does do that as soon as you save the segment. So, yeah, and also those, you run that on a cron job, but pretty much in real time, if a behavior changes, like they suddenly say that they are in the US and they weren't, then the next time that cron job runs, they go into that segment.
Okay.
So it kind of updates it in real time. We also have static segments, which is just like your traditional, I import a list and I add them to this segment, or you just add people based on something in a campaign rather than being based on those fields. So,
And then
Okay.
I imagine if you had okay, let's say you had a list of 200 people and you created
mhm,
that segment and it got down to 50 people, right? I'm assuming that if you were to email those people or contact those people in some way, right?
mhm,
You could then associate a point value to their response. Like, hey, if they respond to this email, click this button, do this thing,
mhm.
increase their score by 25 points. And you might have a better you might be able to get to a subsegment of those 50 that are actively engaged, right?
That's right, yeah, and you can also use points to actually degrade your leads so that if they're not engaging and they're not taking action and they're not going through the motions with the things that you're engaging them with, there isn't much point in keeping it depending on your marketing time period and life
Mm,
cycle, it might be that you actually don't want to keep sending emails to them because that could harm your domain reputation. So
right.
you can also do that kind of degradation, and then if they start being active again, then they'll come back up. But if they get below a certain point level for a particular type of points, then you just drop them out of your active nurturing flow, for example, and they just go into
Mm.
like a retainer type
Yeah.
flow.
So I mean,
So it's pretty powerful.
yeah. So the next point, like you could whittle that list of 50 down to like 10 people, but at least you know that those 10
Mhm.
people are super engaged and they're the 10 people that you really want to focus on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it really helps you to narrow down what you're specifically interested in
Mm,
without having to kind of so the more relevant you can make the messaging, the more relevant you can make the approach to those contacts, the more likely you are to get the action that you want to come out of that, like turning up at an event or, buying a particular thing and stuff like that. So,
interesting.
yeah.
So I'm wondering all these
Mhm.
great features, all of this great reporting and the ability to, kind of really understand your users. What, if any, are like the common pitfalls or mistakes that you see teams make when they adopt
Mhm.
Mautic, and how can we avoid them?
I think despite the fact that we have it written everywhere, you shouldn't use Mautic shared hosting. We still get quite a few people using Mautic shared hosting in an under-resourced capacity, which is fine for the small scale.
Is there also a
Um,
security or privacy issue there?
there can be, it depends
Okay.
on what shared hosting you're using, I guess, and how carefully you manage that. And because with shared hosting, you can't control the infrastructure, you can't control the dependency, outdated versions and stuff.
Hmm.
So that's a common thing, and people get problems with things not running properly, or like cron jobs failing halfway through.
Hmm.
I think another big thing is like you can't automate your way out of a bad strategy. And so you do need to think about marketing strategy. A lot of people will start with Multic and just literally be doing email blasts. And then they take the time to think, right, how can we build this and how can we use points to do our email blast better? I think that's great. But like jumping in, trying to use everything without having a clear plan of how you're personalizing and more importantly, why you're personalizing, that can often be not a great experience for your users
Right.
and not the best revenue generation for you. Like you haven't really thought through how it's going to work best for your business.
Yeah,
And I think,
I imagine jumping in and blasting everybody, and then, like, people are like, "Oh
uh
god, stop." And then you go,
yeah,
"Oh, let's implement a point strategy." Like, you've already kind of turned that person off. You missed your mark there, right?
yeah, and there are basic things that you do in terms of email hygiene for like making sure that you warm up a new IP address gradually. You don't just send to 5,000 people from a brand new email address through a new email sending provider. You do that gradually with your warmer contacts and then open it up. So if people jump in without having someone who has some experience with marketing on the team,
Mm,
then that can also backfire a little bit. Particularly email service providers are very, very tight now on the complaint ratio.
mm.
So when you send an email, you have to keep that complaint ratio super small. And if you're not careful, you can easily fall foul of that, and then they will stop. They'll throttle you at first, but then they'll just kick you off basically if you do that. So thinking carefully about your strategy for adopting automation. And I think also people need to understand how open source works. You
Mhm.
know, they need to understand that if you're using a free open source tool and you need support, you need to take out a support contract with an organization or be willing to just rely on the open source community's goodwill. But I think you get that same in Drupal where people are like, you need to give me the answer to this question right now. And it's kind of like, if you're relying on it for your business, then you need to think about how are you actually going to support it and if you need an additional level of support
Yeah.
because there is a bit of a learning curve, when you first start. So
Are there shops out there that specialize in providing Mautic support and development?
yeah, absolutely. And also like taking care of the updates, for example, we release pretty much every month with a patch update, a security release once a quarter, a minor release once a quarter as well. So we do have a pretty established release cadence, and there are releases that come regularly. So it's something that you need to think about if you're using Mautic is like how you plan for your update strategy as well.
It's funny, I was actually like, "Oh, I got the development side, like, updates seem like something I could handle." I was more thinking on the marketing side of, like, building the strategy and doing all that, but I'm sure
Yeah.
there are folks out there that could help with that, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, most of our partners do provide marketing strategy as well as the hosting and support side of things. Particularly if you're a web agency and you haven't done an awful lot of marketing, what we've seen really successful is that they start by partnering up with a Mautic agency
Mm,
and they help them kind of white label to start with until they're confident enough to take it in house. And that's worked really
Mm.
well, helping some agencies get established with either using it in house or like providing it to clients, but having that hand holding in the first year or so from another organization to do that knowledge transfer. And that's worked really well for some of our agencies.
That's really interesting. I'm thinking more about the future and
Mhm.
running the risk of a whole overflow of eye rolling. I think it's it's
I know what's coming.
yeah. Yeah, we all do. Blah blah AI messing everything up. What do you see as the future of open source marketing automation? How is it changing in light of AI? Where does Mautic fit into that landscape?
Yeah, good question. So we've got an AI working group that's working on this, and Mautic created a community and council created an AI manifesto of how we see AI coming into Mautic, so we can put that in the show notes afterwards. I do think it's really important that we keep with the times, so to speak, and we're all using AI in some way, shape, or form, whether you know it or not, I guess. What we've decided in Mautic is that we need whatever we implement AI wise, it needs to be done in a sustainable way, not in a who new feature we need to drop this into Mautic right away. So what we're going to be doing probably most likely is implementing Symphony's AI bundle within Mautic, which will enable people to use whatever LLM providers they need, whether they're using a locally hosted or a cloud hosted and so forth. And we're looking at starting in the lowest touch, safest place, which is reporting and analytics, because in Mautic, that's probably the weakest area. It's the area that we need to really improve and give some love, but it's also fairly safe in terms of we're not changing any data. We don't need to have access to personally identifiable data. So that's our plan to start with is to implement some AI resources to allow people to actually interpret and analyze their data more effectively and then move to a more conversational tool that can help you with that, but also with understanding how to optimize. And later on, go into a more agentic option that allows you to change stuff, But the important thing is that you will have the option to completely shut off all AI and never hear from it again unless you go and set it up, instead of having all these nags everywhere telling
Yeah.
you should be using it. And you can turn it on component by component instead of an all or nothing. So you could just have reporting and analytics help and not have any of the agentic stuff.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's sort of where we're going. And things like helping you write better emails, helping you create more effective campaigns by using, well, what time do people actually open these emails in this segment? All of that kind of stuff is the way we think that Mautic will really benefit from AI and helping people do their job better and more effectively, really.
That's
I can
cool.
sympathize with that as somebody who sends out emails for a nonprofit organization. The amount of interaction I have with ChatGPT when those emails have to go out to say like, okay, write me this email. Okay, that sounds good. Let's change that and this and this. Okay, we're gonna edit it a little bit and then we send it out. Like
Mhm.
bringing that into the marketing automation platform feels like a natural
Mhm.
progression to me.
I also
Yeah.
like to
So
focus on the data side of things because especially in
Mm,
systems that have been around for a while and they're huge, they've got a ton of information in them. I think being able to parse that and to get
Mhm.
meaningful insights out of it is super
yeah,
important. And it's
Mhm.
where AI really shines right now, where LLMs really
Yeah.
shine. And
absolutely.
that's
I
Yeah.
imagine like AI guided segmentations to be like a really valuable tool for individuals.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give Nick a second to
yeah,
break in here because I feel like he's got something to say.
I do. I'll say I think having the ability to turn it off and disable it is something that needs to be preserved. More tools should
Mm.
have that. But I'm actually curious about how AI is impacting Mautic in a slightly different manner, which is kind of
Mhm.
sustainability. Because what Drupal, the Drupal community right now is kind of trying to work out how their guidelines need to shift in the world of AI. And we're
Mm.
really struggling with defining what's acceptable use. But I
Mm.
think one of the things that the community in general in Drupal is missing is that we've been lar- whether it's a blessing or a curse, there's a high bar to contributing to Drupal. And the fact that we're
Mm.
on GitLab and Drupal.org has actually protected us from a lot of the slop that a lot of open source communities are getting, or the
Mm.
onslaught of like hundreds and hundreds of issues being created by bots, because most
Mm.
bots are just set up to integrate with GitHub. Now,
Mhm.
you guys are on GitHub. I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious how AI has impacted kind of contribution in the community in general. Have you been hit with kind of just spurious issues being created
Mm.
and merge requests, or is that something that hasn't affected you yet either?
Yeah, so we did the GitHub Secure Open Source Fund training recently, and that was super helpful and very insightful to hear from other open source projects who have been really hit by this kind of behavior. And I mean, give them due where where it's due, credit where it's due. That GitHub have been working really hard to help maintainers stop that kind of behavior. We've had some. A lot of the time, it's if we've got a bounty on an issue. And then we get bots trying to fix the issue with totally irrelevant fixes that are not even files that exist in Mautic and have no way that that would ever fix the problem. So those ones, it's manual effort. You still have to review it and you still have to close it, but it's not
Yeah,
been overwhelming. On the positive side, we have Copilot. So we have Copilot review PRs. That has actually been really helpful. So it reviews our documentation PRs and it's picked up stuff where people have made typos or whatever. And although we use Veil and linters and things to pick that up, Copilot has picked up some we haven't. But it also reviews PRs in Mautic and it's picked up errors and improvement in code that our code reviewers hadn't actually picked up. So from that perspective, the AI stuff in Mautic has been helpful. And our developers have found it helpful. Like we've written some prompts to tell agents how to actually interact with Mautic, which I think people have
yeah,
found useful. And things like writing automated tests that people don't like doing, and it can take a really long time. We found that new developers particularly can get quite a head start on that, and then that can be reviewed by one of our core team and say, oh, actually, you should probably do it like this because of this case in Mautic. But
Yeah.
they've got like three-quarters of the way there. There's no excuse now for not writing a test when you can just ask your AI bot to do it for you, whereas in
Yeah.
the past, people would just not. So
I will say that my experience with tests is that it's good at setting up kind of general tests, but you have to be really and this is true whether a human like, this is one of the reasons why the Drupal community is having trouble with this, is
Mhm.
that the behavior itself the problem isn't necessarily the behavior or the outcome, it's the
Mm,
volume and the intent behind it, right? It's one thing for if a human spends 5 hours writing tests that are completely wrong, it's very easy to be sympathetic to
yeah.
them and, like, be like, "Hey, you spent a lot of effort. Some of it was misguided. Let me help you. Let me mentor you. Let's get you in the right place." But when the same person just uses AI to spew that out in 30 seconds and didn't give a care, it's a lot harder to be
Yeah,
sympathetic. The same
I
thing
think
is
yeah.
true.
you have to fight fire with fire that I think that Ruth, what you mentioned that I think is really important, right? Is that you have some automated code review, right? You have
Mm,
AI doing some code review. And whether we like it or not, like this is going to be a problem. Bots are going to be opening merge requests constantly. And the way that you deal with
mhm,
this as an open source project is you have AI as your first line of defense.
mm,
We might not like it, right? But I don't think that there's a reasonable way to stop the flood, and
mm,
I don't think that there's and we don't have the volunteers, we don't have the humans to do the first round of
mm,
code reviews.
mm,
That's just
I mean I think I'll take slight issue with saying there's no reasonable way to stop the flood. I mean, we have tools in place for things like email, right? And as Ruth
mm,
said, we found ways to solve that, right? Servers now take into account open rates and reports very
mm,
strictly, and if we just need to have something similar that applies to people that are facilitating opening these and flows back to some way that flows
mm,
back to the agents or tools themselves. So, like, if if we find that this person has a bot that's opening issues that are getting closed outright across, you know, 20% of the things are being closed, well, that bot just loses their token until the person fixes
mhm,
it, like, right?
mm,
And and similarly with like Claude or like the new, was it the Claw
mm,
bot or whatever? Like if they're opening, if they're it's not a single person, but their tool is opening by default, it somehow needs to flow back upstream as a spam thing. But the other point I really wanted to make though is that you still need somebody in the loop that has expertise in testing, which is very hard because one of the things that
mhm,
bots do very well, which is the same thing that new users do, is they test the expected outcome, right?
mm,
Which doesn't necessarily provide the best test. Like it proves that the thing you wanted to happen happens, but doesn't help protect against what you really want is like regressions or, hey, if you don't have a segment assigned to this person, everything blows up, right? And so
yeah,
you still need that expertise. And I think AI can help with kind of building the harness or like the test, like it's extending the right class and it's putting in the right place and it's doing that stuff. But you still have to think through the logic. You still need the expertise to think through how do we want to
mm,
make sure that this test coverage is good? But that's
yeah.
the
I mean,
problem with
we
humans or AI. Like it
we
doesn't
also have end-to-end
work.
tests as well as the functional and the unit tests. So we do have an end-to-end test. We just don't have much coverage right now. So,
Yeah.
but that is the set exactly what you're saying. Like when you do this thing, do all of the things you should do in Mautic still work?
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
going back to the open source sustainability aspect
Mhm.
and switching the lens a little bit more towards the financial, right? So
Mm. Yeah.
um I'm wondering kind of what the outlook looks like for
Mhm.
Mautic, and I understand, I think that the community is doing some sort of fundraising right now
Mhm.
to help support,
Yeah.
Mautic sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mhm. Yeah, so since we spun out from Acquia, we've been completely self-funded. So we are on Open Collective. Open Source Collective is our fiscal host. So everyone can see all of the transactions back to, I think we started using it in 2021
Hmm,
on
okay.
Open Source Collective, which is great because it's a public ledger. People can see all of the way that the funds are used and so on and so forth. So far we've been doing pretty well. I mean, we've gone from 0 to like 150K income a year in a couple of years, which is not to be sniffed at. And we budget every year. We share the budget with the community who decide to accept that budget and so forth. But what happens when you have the conditions that we have in the world right now, just the
Mm,
general conditions, is a lot of organizations tightening their belts and a lot of organizations rebudgeting to tighten their belts.
okay.
So at the end of last year, we heard that a big contract we were expecting, which is worth about 30 grand, didn't go through because of
Mm,
rebudgeting. And we also had a couple of members decide to drop their tier. So within like 4 weeks, we'd lost $60,000 of funding. That's why we're doing this fundraiser right now, because in a project that only has like 150, 160K income a year, that's a massive amount to lose.
yeah.
So
Almost 50%.
yeah, right. It's something like 40%, I think, of last year's
Yeah.
income. So it's always something I've said to people is like, yeah, now we're not dependent on Acquia. We don't just want to replace Acquia with another benevolent organization. And
Mm,
then at some point in the future, we're still dependent on that organization. We need a broad base of financial contributors across our ecosystem rather than a few small benevolent ones to make sure that we are truly resilient. So we've been working on that anyway, and this has just forced that. So yeah, we have had to rebudget ourselves as a result of that. So I used to work full time. I'm now 3 days a week temporarily until we resolve these situations. And we've had to cut our budget that was non-essential basically. So, things like sticker swag for people who contribute. We can't afford that because we've got to post it all around the world and that costs money.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
until we actually resolve this and we get back onto a good financial footing, we've had to sort of scale back on the things that do help grow and nurture. So we're kind of going into a minimalist period until we get
Yeah.
the ball rolling. But so far so good. I mean, we launched the fundraiser on Thursday. We're already at nearly $9,000.
Mm,
Our minimum goal is 40,000. So actually, we've got some good momentum, but we've got to keep that going. So yeah, it's tough, and we're not the only open source project that has
Yeah.
had this kind of issue. Lots of US funding was just removed overnight, for example, and some lost millions through that. So we're trying to diversify our revenue streams. So we have memberships. We also have certification we're about to launch. We run our Mautic World Conference, which we have sponsors for, and extended long-term support as well, so that we have multiple streams that bring revenue into the
I
community rather than just membership, which is donations, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you solve that problem, please let me know because it is open
It's
source
really tough.
sustainability. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even if you look, one of the things that struck me recently is DDEV is kind of going through a similar thing, right? They
Yeah,
lost
yeah.
a fair amount of funding from one of their primary sources. They've been fundraising again. They've built back up quite a bit of it. And to be honest, like the amount I'm seeing DDEV just in places where I don't expect it. Like I ran into an issue. I see you
mm.
guys using DDEV. I
Mhm.
ran into an
Yeah.
issue the other day where I was trying to install Matomo for somebody and ran into a weird case because I had DDEV installed within DDEV, and I'm like, "What?" And it turns out that Matomo uses DDEV, and Silver Stripe started using D like, it seems like every PHP project on the planet is starting to use DDEV,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so we need to find a way to just get these companies like, we kinda need a global, like, if you're using open source, you put this much money in it, we find out what open source projects you use, we divvy it up between them all so
Yeah.
everybody gets the
Goes
same
back
money.
to goes back to my idea of like an open source sustainability fund that is, you know, it is a portion invested to keep itself moving and it then
Yeah.
goes to
It's a hard
pay
problem.
some of these projects, but it's not it's not so easy to ask folks for large sums of money to fund those sorts of things, as we're all finding out.
Yeah, there are some tools out there like thanks.dev, for example,
Mm,
that let you do that. Like, here's a chunk of money, give it to the dependencies that I use, that kind of thing. And there's also
Yeah.
ecosystems, which is syste.ms, which is like really hard to say, but they allow you to find out what open source is being used in your apps. So
Hmm.
Can we
there
put that
are
second one in the show notes too? Because I got the Thanks tab,
sure.
but not the other one, and then make sure we promote those. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, sustainability, it's something that the Drupal community has been talking about for a long time.
Mm,
It I think the DA is dealing with similar, not as severe, but the DA is certainly dealing with, funding issues and, it's just
mm,
there's multiple levels of sustainability. There's, of course, cash, but there's
mm,
also, time and willingness and
yeah,
expertise and stuff. So,
yeah.
So
yeah, let
let's dive into that a little bit. If you can't donate cash,
Mhm,
but you are a developer or user who does
yeah.
want to contribute to Mautic,
Mhm.
how can folks do that? How can you get involved with the project?
So we have a quick link to get to our main contribution resource, which is mau.tc/contribute. And we'll put that in the show notes. But that is like our contribution overview page on our community handbook. As developers, there are lots of ways you can support Mautic. If you know Symfony, then a great way to help is like just finding one of the small bugs that is in the issue queue. They usually have good first issue or they're tagged with T1, which means tier one. They're quite a small issue that shouldn't take long to fix. And then we have documentation on how to make a pull request in that contribution guidelines, how to write tests, which branch to use. All of that is documented. As you said, we use DDev. So you just spin up an instance locally. It's got Xdebug installed and everything there for you. There's also the option to do PR testing. Like we do require two humans to review every PR as well
okay.
as AI. And that's a good way if you haven't used Mautic before, because it does help you to explore the application more because you've got to reproduce the bug and then you pull down the pull request and check if it actually fixes the bug. So those are two good ways. And if we were talking earlier before we started about technical writers who are also developers, our API documentation hasn't actually been updated and brought across to our new developer docs. So it's still kind of quite outdated and not in the format we need for our new docs. So if developers are up for like poking a few buttons on our API in Postman or the tool of choice, seeing what the response is and then writing the documentation to tell developers, that's a really lovely way that we desperately, desperately need people. But we're not all developers. We have tons of low and no code tasks as well. So mau.tc/no-code goes to overboard on a project board on GitHub, which has loads of different types of tasks from marketing to documentation writing to UX UI and so on and so forth. So yeah, if you have skills, whether it's as a designer, a marketer, a developer, we have more than enough things that you can help us with.
So there's always a lot of work to do in open source, right?
Oh yes. Yeah, yeah, for
Well,
sure.
thank you, Ruth, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to chat about Mautic again with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to talk more.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
If you would like to be a guest on Talking Drupal or our new show, TD Cafe, you can click on the guest request button in the sidebar at talkingdrupal.com.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
And you can get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest host, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button in the sidebar.
All right, Ruth, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can reach out to me on email, ruth.cheesley@mautic.org, so CHEESLEY. And I'm on most social platforms, so Mastodon, Blue Sky, Twitter, etc. Just search for my name.
Awesome. And Catherine, how about you?
Yeah, the Drupal Slack channel is probably easiest, or the workspace, and it's under Katarina Savukis, how my name is spelled here.
Awesome. And John, how about you?
You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. You can find me personally at picozzi.com, and you can find out more about EPAM at epam.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, Nicxvan.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Thanks a lot, everyone.
See you next week.